Now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day, because Saul had placed them under an oath, saying, "Let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies." "My father has made trouble for us all," Jonathan exclaimed. "A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey. If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they found among our enemies, think how many more Philistines we could have killed." What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alrighty. So, we are looking at 1 Samuel chapter 14, and context for this, Saul is king of Israel, but not too long, well, actually an unknown amount of time, but seemingly not too long after becoming king, he's in a battle with the Philistines, and things are looking kind of bad. He's supposed to wait for Samuel to make a particular offering to get the Lord's blessing, but the appointed amount of time passes, and he gets tired of waiting, so he tries to do the offering himself, and right then Samuel shows up and is like, "What are you doing? This is bad. You just basically ignored God's commands. So, guess what? Your kingdom is going to end rather quickly now. Like, you might still be king for a while longer, but your descendants will not continue to rule over Israel." And then things went from bad to worse against the Philistines. And that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in or the situation we find the Israelites in this chapter. So, without further ado, here we go. This is 1 Samuel chapter 14. One day Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come on, let's go over to where the Philistines have their outpost." But Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. Meanwhile, Saul and his 600 men were camped on the outskirts of Gibeah, around the pomegranate tree at Migron. Among Saul's men were Ahijah the priest, who was wearing the ephod, the priestly vest. Ahijah was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord who had served at Shiloh. Now, Eli was the one serving as priest when Samuel was born and when he kind of got raised in service of the priests. So, while Eli's immediate family, and especially his sons and some other relatives, might have gotten a swift death because they didn't serve as priests the way they should have. Especially Eli's sons didn't really care about it the way they were supposed to. They might have met a swift end at one point, but further descendants still persisted. I don't know. I guess maybe it speaks to Eli's age and just how many people in his family there were already that it's still talking about. So, Phinehas was Eli's son. Then we had Ahitub, who was his son. And then Ichabod was brother, so same generation there, but then, so we've still got like 2 generations after Eli's sons is the person who's now serving in the priest's role here. But anyway, so yeah, Saul only has 600 men with him. He initially had, I think, 3,000 chosen men to try and fight the Philistines with. And they had some slight success early on, but then crushing defeat after the Philistines just decided to bring more people into the fight, I guess. But anyway, so Saul was doing stuff. Jonathan's like, hey, let's go to the Philistine outpost here. Probably kind of sneakily. Now, where Saul was, it mentions they were at the outskirts of Gibeah, around the pomegranate tree at Migron. Or, according to the footnote here, it could have been around the rock of Rimmon. Now, I do remember the rock of Rimmon being mentioned previously. It actually gives you references here in Judges. But either way, some significant landmark that was presumably in a different direction. Anyway, we've got a long chapter ahead of us for this one, so let me not talk too much more on a particular moment. So we'll continue on toward the tail end of verse 3. No one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. To reach the Philistine outpost, Jonathan had to go down between two rocky cliffs that were called Bozez and Seneh. The cliff on the north was in front of Michmash, and the one on the south was in front of Geba. Let's go across to the outpost of those pagans, Jonathan said to his armor-bearer. Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle whether he has many warriors or only a few. Do what you think is best, the armor-bearer replied. I'm with you completely, whatever you decide. That seems to indicate a couple of things. A, Jonathan's faith in God, and, what God can do. And also, the armor-bearer's faith in Jonathan, and or God. But, presumably at least in Jonathan. Now remember, Jonathan is Saul's son. So, he also kind of, actually it mentioned in the previous chapter that Jonathan kind of had a significant role within the army. He actually led a group of the troops against the Philistines, when they still had the 3,000 men. But, continue on to verse 8. All right then, Jonathan told him. We will cross over and let them see us. If they say to us, stay where you are, or we'll kill you, then we will stop and not go up to them. But if they say, come on up and fight, then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them. When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, Look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes. Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, Come on up here and we'll teach you a lesson. Come on, climb right behind me, Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, for the Lord will help us defeat them. So they climbed up using both hands and feet, and the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer killed those who came behind them. They killed some 20 men in all, and their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly panic broke out in the Philistine army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outposts and raiding parties. And just then an earthquake struck, and everyone was terrified. So, Jonathan and his armor-bearer, on their own, end up killing around 20 Philistine warriors. Which, in and of itself, doesn't sound absurd, depending a little bit on the circumstances. But that was just the introduction to what happened, because then there was an earthquake, which probably, in and of itself, had everybody worried, okay, wait, there's an earthquake, what's going to happen? I don't want to get swallowed up in some major, crack in the ground or something. And or might have been some sort of omen of bad things coming upon the Philistines. But, so yeah, they go up and have, an initial bit of success in fighting against the Philistines. And this is, to the best of our understanding, as far as it explains it here, this is literally just Jonathan and his armor bearer. Nobody else is with them. There's a footnote here where it mentioned the bodies being scattered over about half an acre. Hebrew says half a yoke. A yoke was the amount of land plowed by a pair of yoked oxen in one day. Okay. Might not necessarily have been an acre, but, maybe decent enough spread, but not like, I don't know. It's not like massive. One acre is, I'm trying to think relative to, things that I personally know. I think my parents' house sits on a plot of land that's about half an acre. So, I mean, an acre's still fairly big, but take like 2 suburban house plots. And that's, I guess, about the size you're working with. Just the land area. But, anyway, so it's like, soldiers are dropping off to one side here. Nobody really seems to know what's going on. They're starting to get worried. And then an earthquake only adds to that for the Philistines. And then we get to verse 16. Saul's lookouts in Gibeah of Benjamin saw a strange sight. The vast army of Philistines began to melt away in every direction. Call the roll and find out who's missing, Saul ordered. And when they checked, they found that Jonathan and his armor-bearer were gone. Then Saul shouted to Ahijah, "Bring the ephod here." For at that time, Ahijah was wearing the ephod in front of the Israelites. But while Saul was talking to the priest, the confusion of the Philistine camp grew louder and louder. So Saul said to the priest, "Never mind, let's get going." I wonder if he was, trying to call the priest to give an offering to bless their battle or whatever. Or maybe try and get something else, some other word from the Lord. Hopefully he had maybe learned a bit of a lesson from before, but who knows. In any case, there was a big commotion among the Philistines, so much that Saul and his troops heard it and kind of wondered what was going on. Saul wanted to get the priest involved in some way or another, but then he notices the noise from the Philistines getting even louder and says, "Never mind, let's get going." I would think probably his mindset was, clearly there's some sort of thing going on, something big that's causing a stir, and we should take advantage of that while we have something to work with. We've got footnotes to look at here. So where it says Philistines begin to melt away in every direction, that's coming more so from the Greek version. Hebrew reads, they went and there. You would think it should be like they went here and there, as in they were just like confused, scattering around. But I guess it's still kind of the same general intent either way. So they might have gone with the Greek, because that was a little bit easier and or clearer what it was saying. Footnote adds, wearing the ephod in front of the Israelites. That's it, as in some Greek manuscripts. Hebrew reads, bring the ark of God. for at that time the ark of God was with the Israelites, rather than bringing the ephod because it was being worn in front of the Israelites. Yeah, bringing the ark would maybe make a little more sense, because I don't think the ephod was really supposed to be worn much outside of the tabernacle. It was pretty much purely for, like, the main, offerings and whatnot. Don't think it was really supposed to be worn too much outside of that. But anyway, footnote here. Never mind, let's get going. Hebrews says, withdraw your hand. Kind of as a, you know what, forget it. In case, I guess, whatever the priest was about to do, whether it be an offering or something else. Saul's like, never mind, forget it, don't worry about it. And then we pick up in verse 20. Then Saul and all his men rushed out to the battle and found the Philistines killing each other. There was terrible confusion everywhere. Even the Hebrews who had previously gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined in with Saul, Jonathan, and the rest of the Israelites. Likewise, the men of Israel who were hiding in the hill country of Ephraim joined the chase when they saw the Philistines running away. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle continued to rage even beyond Beth-aven. So that's basically just the Philistines doing the same kind of thing that happened, if you remember, back in Judges with Gideon and, the army they were up against. Just absolute panic, confusion. They're running around, not even sure. Now, I did notice here it mentioned Hebrews who had previously gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined with Saul, Jonathan, and the Israelites. So there were Hebrews, Israelite soldiers, amongst the Philistine army. That could have had a major hand in the Philistines panicking and being confused here. Because they might have wound up thinking, did these Hebrews join our army just to wait for an opportune moment and attack us from within? That could have been their mindset. I'm not saying for sure that it was, but it could have been their mindset in this moment, and it would explain even more so the Philistines going around and just killing each other, because then there's even greater confusion of who they're supposed to trust and who they're not able to trust. Let's move along. Verse 24. Now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day, because Saul had placed them under an oath, saying, let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies. So no one ate anything all day, even though they had all found honeycomb on the ground in the forest. They didn't dare touch the honey because they all feared the oath they had taken. But Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of his stick into a piece of honeycomb and ate the honey. After he had eaten it, he felt refreshed. But one of the men saw him and said, your father made the army take a strict oath that anyone who eats food today will be cursed. That is why everyone is weary and faint. Yeah. This is at least the second time in the past couple of books of the Bible where somebody making an oath kind of backfires, specifically against their children. But, in this case it was Saul making this oath while Jonathan was not there to hear it or be informed. So Jonathan had a little bit of something to eat, giving him a little more strength, which in a way was good, but it also may have invoked Saul's curse. Okay, so this verse where it says, after he had eaten, he felt refreshed, could also read, his eyes brightened instead of he felt refreshed. But, anyway, similar kind of idea that, he was more awake, more energetic, more alert, and basically more ready for battle. Okay, verse 29. This is Jonathan speaking here. My father has made trouble for us all, Jonathan exclaimed. A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey. If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they found among our enemies, I think how many more Philistines we could have killed. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Aijalon, growing more and more faint. That evening they rushed for the battle plunder and butchered the sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, but they ate them without draining the blood. Someone reported to Saul, Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that still has blood in it. That was actually a command that was given way back, I want to say in like Exodus or Leviticus or something like that. It was, from a practical standpoint, it was a way to, make sure that their food was properly cooked. But also, because of the way that the command is worded, it was, they were essentially disobeying God by eating this meat before it had really cooked the way it was supposed to. Anywho, okay, moving along, kind of partway through verse 33, we pick this up. That is very wrong, Saul said. Find a large stone and roll it over here. Then go out among the troops and tell them, bring the cattle, sheep, and goats here to me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it. So that night all the troops brought their animals and slaughtered them there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first of the altars he built to the Lord. Okay, also, if Saul wouldn't have made that previous oath that made the troops so hungry at this point, they might not have been in such a rush to get this food. So, it's kind of his own mistake. At least he's doing something to try and fix it or make it better moving forward. But anyway, still kind of his fault. Anywho, after Saul built the altar, we get to verse 36. Then Saul said, let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every last one of them. His men replied, we'll do whatever you think is best. But the priest said, let's ask God first. So Saul asked God, should we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them? But God made no reply that day. Then Saul said to the leaders, something's wrong. I want all my army commanders to come here. We must find out what sin was committed today. I vow by the name of the Lord who rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die, even if it is my own son Jonathan. But no one would tell him what the trouble was. Ha ha, really? Even if it's your own son, you say? Again, hasty words. Being problematic. Anyway, yeah, because Jonathan was the one who had eaten the honey and gone against his previous oath because he didn't know. Although, the trouble could have been Jonathan doing that. It could have also been the meat being eaten before it was, drained of blood in the early goings of that situation. But anyway, we'll get more info probably if we continue along here in verse 40. Then Saul said, Jonathan and I will stand over here, and all of you stand over there. And the people responded to Saul, whatever you think is best. Then Saul prayed, O Lord God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent. Then they cast sacred lots, and Jonathan and Saul were chosen as the guilty ones, and the people were declared innocent. Then Saul said, Now cast lots again and choose between me and Jonathan. And Jonathan was shown to be the guilty one. Tell me what you have done, Saul demanded of Jonathan. I tasted a little honey, Jonathan admitted. It was only a little bit on the end of my stick. Does that deserve death? Yes, Jonathan, Saul said. You must die. May God strike me and even kill me if you do not die for this. But the people broke in and said to Saul, Jonathan has won this great victory over Israel. Should he die? Far from it. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair on his head will be touched, for God helped him do a great deed today. So the people rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul called back the army from chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines returned home. So, yeah, all those hasty words nearly wound up getting Jonathan killed and kind of, figuratively biting Saul in the butt, because his own son would have wound up dying because of his hasty words. And Jonathan not being around to hear what he said. But, sorry, I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't miss any footnotes. No. Okay. Doesn't seem like it, at least for the earlier sections. There was a footnote G somewhere around here. There we go. So the Greek version adds to this part where it says, Lord God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent. Greek adds, if the fault is with me or my son Jonathan, respond with Urim, but if the men of Israel are at fault, respond with Tumim. Urim and Tumim were these instruments. I'm not sure what exactly to call them. I'm not 100% sure what they even looked like exactly. But they were instruments that the priests used to help discern things. This was... Now, it mentions casting lots a little later. It's that kind of thing where they, like... Okay, so similar to the Philistines back in chapter 5 or 6, whichever it was, when they wanted to get rid of the Ark of the Covenant, similar to them just basically, taking new cows, tying them to a cart with the Ark of the Covenant on it, and sending them off for Israel, and letting the cows do what they would do. This was sort of a similar kind of method of doing something where they would kind of let the pieces fall, so to speak, as they would, and usually there would be some sort of request from God, kind of reflecting Saul's words in this footnote here, that's like, all right, give us a sign. Is it this or that? So, I guess you could sort of equate it with flipping a coin, or if there were more things going on, it might have, there might have been some added complexity to that. But in any case, point being, it wasn't like they were leaving it up to luck. It was that they were trying to call upon the Lord and have him guide the Urim and Tumim to show, basically to reveal the truth to them, to show them what, in this case, who was in the wrong, and help figure out what was going on and how to fix the problem or, respond to all that. But anyway, enough about that. But basically the other men, because of this victory, said, no, Jonathan shouldn't die. He just led us to this. So, because it seemed like the Lord had Jonathan's back, the soldiers didn't want to kill Jonathan. Partially, I would guess, in case God's blessing would then sort of leave them. Jonathan was the one that seemed to be blessed, and maybe that blessing would leave along with him if they killed him. Anyway, alright, now we'll get to verse 47 and kind of wrap up the chapter here in a bit. Now when Saul had secured his grasp on Israel's throne, he fought against his enemies in every direction, against Moab, Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he was victorious. He performed great deeds and conquered the Amalekites, saving Israel from all those who had plundered them. Saul's sons included Jonathan, Ishbosheth, and Malchishua. Whatever. He also had 2 daughters, Merab, who was older, and Michal. Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. The commander of Saul's army was Abner, son of Saul's uncle Ner. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were both sons of Abiel. The Israelites fought constantly with the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. So whenever Saul observed a young man who was brave and strong, he drafted him into his army. So, I guess that gives a little more background on Saul, his family, and a slightly broader picture of things that happened during his reign as king. But the Philistines apparently persisted as a problem the entire time. And I guess what we read about in this chapter and the couple of chapters prior was just the start of it, in a way. Now, this note at the end about him, drafting brave and strong men into his army constantly because of the Philistines, that right there fulfilled some of God's words, which were then repeated by Samuel later on, about what would happen if Israel had a king. That was supposed to be one of the reasons why they would maybe refrain from having a king. Because that's generally not something that they would want. Just any and all young, strong, brave men to get drafted into the army just because that's how they were. There might have been some other things that they could have been useful for, but Saul basically wound up putting them all in his army because of the constant conflict with the Philistines and other peoples around them. Got some footnotes to look at here. Wherever he turned, he was victorious. That's how the Greek reads. Hebrew says he acted wickedly. I suppose talking about, him being maybe a little more on the ruthless side and or just, insisting on attacking the people around them, perhaps to the point of not even trying to make peace. Footnote here at Ishbosheth. Hebrew says Ishvi, a variant name for Ishbosheth, also known as Eshbaal, or Eshbaal, whatever. Any other footnotes in amongst all this? No. Okay. So yeah, I guess, good that the Israelites are having a little more success. But it's, you're seeing the signs of Saul, fitting what was prophesied about a king in Israel, that he would be, that he would draft all their young men, or at least all their strong men, that he would perhaps even, as this footnote implies, or even just outright mentions, that he would be a bit ruthless, maybe even harsh to some extent to his own people. I mean, he seemed, at least in, this section about his oath, he was rather brash in, making that oath and saying a bunch of the things that he said there. So, yeah, he was perhaps not exactly a level-headed kind of fellow. Almost makes me wonder, because it said, when he was anointed, that, he was hiding in amongst the baggage or the equipment that was there. The combination of that and him having, some detractors early on almost makes me wonder if he kind of approached the role of king with a bit of a chip on his shoulder the whole time. But anyway, that's just kind of me adding some other thoughts to Saul and what seems to be his character. But that's all we get in this chapter. Okay, so Jonathan, Saul's son, kind of led the charge in getting a win for Israel over the Philistines. And Saul's actions kind of complicated the situation, but ultimately, because the Lord seemed to have favor with Jonathan, the Lord seemed to like Jonathan's attitude and what he was doing, that ultimately wound up kind of saving Jonathan in this whole situation. Otherwise, Saul's words would have gotten him in a whole lot of, I wouldn't say trouble, but a whole lot of hurt at least, because, his own son would have wound up dying because of his own brash oath. Yeah, we keep seeing ways where Saul isn't exactly the best character. But anyway, we'll see more on that in the next chapter, I guess. But anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this anywhere else, give me a follow or whatever you need to for that platform. Look down in the description for info on social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments down below the video with any thoughts you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, until next time, stay cool, people.